So let's jump into some of the more recent things that I've seen you post on Instagram. Are these lino cuts, I'm assuming?
Yes, those are.
So just talk about, what made you want to do portraits in this way and sort of maybe even talk a little bit about how they're made.
For sure. So I kind of call myself a visual storyteller. And a lot of the work that I do has been kind of rooted in uh kind of talking a little bit about myself, about my family lineage, and really kind of capturing things from photo albums. So a lot of the time I grew up looking at old photo albums and really kind of like learning about my parents, siblings through these albums, like having that kind of connection to history and home.
Right.
And in kind of like subsequent years, in the past close to 20 years, I've been taking kind of a deeper dive into uh what I would say is like my family's kind of like diasporic kind of like journey.
Wow.
So from, different places that we as a family and as a lineage have called home, and then, through like DNA research, through verbal lore, kind of exploring that. So I have been doing these portraits as a way to kind of record this. But some of the other portraits that I do are really based on African diasporic and African American kind of experience, and creating a mirror to show, like, a lot of our faces and a lot of our history.
Wow, these are amazing. And it's interesting too because you say that you're a storyteller, which I really connect with. That resonates so much with the work that I've done in the past and continue to do, especially when we talk about our African ancestry. And it's intriguing because when I had a conversation with Asha Sudra, an artist and poet, they did a portrait of I believe it was their grandmother, and they had taken a picture from the photo album and removed the background. And so it looks like you're doing that same thing. So whatever imagery that's in the background, you've just saved the portrait, and it sort of amplifies who they are as a person, especially when you realize that you're consciously doing that. And I think it really highlights more, okay, so what is the story? Rather than just the person, right? And so even though there's nothing in the background, it makes me want to engage more as a viewer, right? To find
Yeah.
out what the background is. And I think that's a wonderful technique that you've developed. Um, Again, can you talk a little bit about how this practice works? Because it's my understanding, right, with printmaking, so you are removing is it linoleum?
Yes.
So you're
So the
removing parts and then um the printed part is the negative, and so it's flipped. Or maybe I'm getting that wrong. So can you explain that? Because
For
it's
sure. And kind of going back to a little bit of what you described, when I think about, like, listening to you speak, it really reminded me of a lot of my earlier work, which probably does not exist on the internet because a lot of it was very much pre-internet, where I was almost doing the opposite. So I was basing a lot of work on either oral history or looking through photo albums. And a lot of the work, the figures were faceless. They were kind of like these stand-in figures, and it was all atmosphere, it was all background. And I think that my justification for working in that way previously was that it was less about the way somebody looked specifically, because I think as a young artist, I had gotten a lot of like, well, that doesn't quite look like so and so, or that doesn't look like me, or who's that supposed to be? And it kind of affected me. So I wanted to kind of take away from having an exact likeness
right.
to have something that was more about the overall kind of like atmosphere. And so I have in recent years switched more to very, like, straightforward depictions of people. And so in this process, it is it's kind of a very step by step. I will physically sketch directly onto the linoleum, and just kind of like in a very technical way. There's different types. There is like that classic battleship gray linoleum, which
Mhm.
many might, kind of, it's almost, it evolved from like floor linoleum. It gets very kind of hard and brittle, and you have to kind of heat it up to get it to move.
Right.
And kind of, printmaking material people use to make, additions and things like that. And I've been using a soft carve, almost rubber textured linoleum,
Okay.
um, rubber, and that has been ergonomic. So with the kind of fighting constantly against linoleum, it can over time really kind of affect your joints. And I was having a hard time with that printmaker's wrist. So I
Right.
have this. And so I will draw directly onto this carving material and then make that decision whether or not I am going to have um, carve out the highlights. So
Mhm.
whites, eyes, wrinkles in skin, highlights in hair, or whether I'm or not I'm going to carve into the face and leave the art outlines out. So it is kind of a thinking about positive and negative space.
Right.
A lot of my thinking when I'm doing this sort of thing is sometimes I will use my blocks in paintings. And so there is going to be like color added to the face. And sometimes it's just so that it can have the spirit of a drawing. So I go in, and then I make that decision as I'm carving out and really kind of going in. So the sketch is always somewhat rough, and then I'm making decisions as I'm carving it,
Okay.
um, kind of seeing how the form comes in. Yeah, so that's it. And then I take an X-Acto knife and cut out, so it's just a block, because I don't want, I think, it's commonly referred to as like a noise, the noise of which I think there are some printmakers I see that make create these beautiful uh patterns and designs and have a little bit of that atmospheric stuff in the back of their prints, but I want it to be clean, like almost like a stamp.